Hello, this is Jim McKeeth. Welcome to this developer skill sprint on new Android features in XE7. This skill sprint is all about Android features, so it only works with Android. While the little bit of code I show you will be in Object Pascal, this will all work the same in RAD Studio, App Method, Object Pascal, C++, Delphi, C++ Builder, etc. So the only limitation really on this one is it is Android specific. So skill sprints, one short topic, really quick to the point, 20 minutes and we go. And this I'm kind of combining a few smaller topics together and probably have a little more slides than usual just to try and cover the details without going into too much time on it because they're pretty simple things, but just a good idea to give you some good information about them. So this is what we're going to cover is the new Android features. There's the Google Mobile Ads SDK replacing AdMob. This also is actually backported to XE6 as well. I'm not going to go any more detailed than that than just this slide here. Just letting you know that this has been updated from AdMob, which is means better support for Android going forward for ads. So it's still going to use the T-banner ad component for that. So there's a new immersive mode, full screen mode, that's available. It only works on KitKat. If you use it on other versions, it doesn't do the feature I'll show you here for this. This is a new feature that is available on KitKat and takes advantage of it through the full screen functionality. A splash screen has finally been added to Android. This is something people have wanted for a while, and now it's available on Android as well as iOS. Push notifications and advertising are now available through project options. I'll show you how that works. Project Manager also gives you the ability to add Java jar file libraries straight to your application right through the Project Manager. It makes it really, really simple to add these Java jar files. And there's also a new tool called Java 2 OP, and it generates Object Pascal interfaces for your Android jar files. So if you have an Android Java jar file, you can just run the Java 2 OP tool and it will generate the Object Pascal interfaces. Now, if you're doing C++, all you have to do is run these through the compiler and the compiler will create C++ headers that you can program against. So you don't have to worry about the Object Pascal. Okay, so the splash screen on Android is typically going to be an image centered on a black background. That's the default behavior. So you're probably going to want to have your splash screen, maybe your logo, on black so that it looks all nice and slick. Now there's some other options. You can tweak this and change it, and I'll show you how some of those work. The one cool thing about the splash screen though is it rotates automatically, so you don't have to create a landscape splash screen or a portrait splash screen and then hope the right one's there. You just select your splash screen and it automatically rotates if the user rotates the screen. This splash screen displays immediately after launch. So there's a few different ways you can do splash screens. In my opinion, this is the best way, the optimum way of doing it. It's displayed immediately after your app launches and then disappears when your form appears. Now some of the options, the default is for tiling is disabled, so it doesn't tile. This is where it just displays the image on the black background. We have some tiling options. Clamp doesn't tile, but what it does is it just puts the image on the edge and then has the edge colors of the image expand. So if you want to have a different color for your image background than black, you can use clamp. Actually, any of these will work with that. Repeat repeats the image, so it does tiling, like normal tiling would be. And then mirror takes the image and repeats it horizontally and vertically, but each alternating image is mirrored. You're most likely, in my opinion, now of course you can use whatever you want to, but you're most likely going to use disabled or clamp for the tile option. Now, if tiling is disabled, then you can specify the splash gravity, and this specifies how the where the image is put out on the screen. And again, you're most likely going to use center, which is down there, second from the bottom, but you could use fill, which would cause it to expand and contract to fill the screen as well as a number of the other options. I didn't go into detail on the start, end, clip vertical, and clip horizontal. I just didn't think they were as interesting, but you can check out some information on those later if you're interested in that. All right, so now let's do a demonstration of splash screen and the rest of the features here that are new for Android in XE7. So this simple application here is what I'll use to guide you through some of the new Android features. First thing I'll show you here is under Project Options. If you come down here to Application, this is where you can include the splash screen. So it's actually included by default. If you want to uncheck that, it will not have the splash screen like you saw previously. So this is the fastest splash screen, pops up right away. Great way to just add the splash screen to your application, and it's going to really significantly slow down your startup time. Here's the tile mode I mentioned in the slides. So like I said, usually you're going to do disabled, which is going to be as centered. So it's going to center this image on a black background. So you notice this image is actually kind of a landscape image. That's fine because it's going to be extended on a black background. So it'll be centered on a black background, even in portrait mode. So the default behavior is disabled centered, which centers that on the black background. Now, if you don't want a black background or you want to not have it centered, etc., then you can use clamp, probably the next most common you'll use. And this will just take the image and stick it up in the top and then extend whatever colors on the edge of the image all the way out, so it expands it out. So if you put on like a white background or whatever color you want to use background, it will extend that color out to fill the entire screen. You can also change the gravity here. Center is probably the most common you're going to use, but just fill, horizontal, center. Let's see what the other ones here are. Fill vertical, top, bottom, left, right, etc. So a number of those there, I mentioned those in the slide, what the different options do. So I'll show you the splash screen running, but I'm not going to show you every permutation here, but you'll get a general idea for what's possible by reading the documentation that explains how all these different features take effect. So anyway, check out the documentation that explains the different, how the different images work and how you select them and such. So the other thing here I'll show you is under entitlements list. Make sure you're on Android, all configurations typically. You probably don't want to just change it for debug or release, but you're going to have this all the time. This is where you can add the advertising or push notification services into your application really easily without having to modify the manifest like before. So that's a cool new feature. So let's take a look at this application running. Before I do that though, I'm going to show you that this button here shows the new full screen functionality, the immersive mode. And so all we do is this is going to toggle full screen property. So the form has a full screen property. By toggling that property, we're going to take advantage of the entire screen. So let's take a look at this running now. So here it is. It appeared. You saw the splash screen come up really quick. Application launch is very fast, so it's not slowing down your application launch time, but there's that splash screen there. The splash screen makes it seem more responsive because the user sees a splash screen instead of the black screen while this application is coming up. Very nice, gives much better user experience. That was the centered splash screen. Like I said, you can change that around with clamp, etc. Okay, so now let's take a look at full screen. Now in KitKat, a lot of the KitKat devices, like this Nexus 7 here, have the soft keys at the bottom. So if you look down here at the bottom, the home button and the back button and the task switch button are on the screen itself. So you see my touch area here is actually on the screen here. And what that allows for with this new immersive mode is that when I go into full screen, it will actually expand all the way down to the bottom and all the way up to the top. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into full screen. And we see now we've expanded all the way down. The first time the user does this, they'll get this little prompt so they know how to get back out, so they don't panic. Let's go ahead and tap OK. So we've now taken up the full screen here. So the home button and stuff like that's all gone at the bottom. But if you see, if I swipe down here at the bottom, it pops back up again. Same thing for the top. If I swipe from the top, it pops up again. So we're not stuck. We can always get back to it again by swiping from the top or bottom to get to the home button and notifications, etc. And then we can toggle full screen off to get rid of that functionality. Okay, that's the new immersive mode that's available in KitKat. Pop into that, get rid of the taskbar, notification bar, and go full screen. All right, so the other thing I'm going to show you here is how easy it is to include Java jar files in your application. So right now I don't have a Java jar file, so this is a simple little base64 encoder. So it turns out Android SDK doesn't have that built in, so it's really common people will use this particular library here to do base64 encoding. If you're using FMX, FireMonkey Framework, we have that built in, so you don't have to worry about that. But this is a nice simple example of how to do this. So I'm going to hit encode, and it's going to give me an error that says, hey, the Java class JBase64 encoder could not be found. So we're going to fix that, and I'll show you how that happens here in the IDE. Now, if you remember back to the skill sprint I did on calling Java APIs, this is the same jar file used from that, and this is the same functionality, but this is way simpler, so that's why it's just a small part of this skill sprint. So here's my Java jar file. So this could be any Java jar file you have that you want to create an interface for. And this is the Java 2 OP utility that I've downloaded. This will be on the registered user download page. So I'm going to go to command prompt here, and I'm going to run the Java 2 OP utility here, and this tells me how to use it. So there's 3 different use cases that you can have here, and then variations within that. So you can just specify classes, and then this will import classes from the Android API. Okay, so if you just specify classes, this will go to the Android API and import new classes. So in this case, here's Android Speech, all the Android Speech classes. So that's useful if there's a different Android API that we haven't exposed that you want to grab and get a hold of and work with. All right. Then if you have a Java jar file, you just specify -jar, and this will import all the classes from the jar file, or you can specify with the classes flag to only import some of those. So that's the use case we're going to use right now. And the third use case is if you have Java source code. So you specify the location of the Java source code, and here we're specifying using the unit parameter, specify what unit we want to create based on that source code. And so this will go through the Java source code and wrap that. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our base64 coder jar file. So I'm just going to run this. And we see it's generated my base64 coder.pass file. So now I need to add in this Java jar file. So there's a new node here under Target Platforms, Android. There's this libraries folder here. And so what I can do is I can actually drag this jar file right here into this folder. And actually, if you drag it anywhere, it gets put here automatically. But you go and drag in, it says, hey, do you want to add this to your project? And you say yes. And now that jar file is included in my project. So this is going to get added to my classes decks automatically. So there's no more going with the deployment manager and changing the default classes decks, the new classes decks. There's no more needing to go to the command line to rebuild your classes decks. It's all done for you automatically. The only reason you go to the command line is to run the Java 2 OP utility. And actually, you could just create these by scratch, or a more likely scenario is you might get these from a third party. A third party might like say, here's a jar file and a header file for it. All you have to do is add that to your project and you're good to go. So now I'll go ahead and compile this and run this on my XE7, and you can see this functionality. Before I compile this and run this on the XE7, though, I'm going to show you the code here. So what I've done is I have created an encode and decode function. And that does the encoding and decoding. And the reason I did that is because in here, I used ifdefs. Now, most likely you'd put this ifdefs in a separate unit so you don't have this cluttered up your project code, but this for this example. So don't do this in production code. But right here, we're saying if it's Android, we're going to use helpers and the base64 coder, which is the wrapper that we created with the Java 2 OP command line utility. If not, we're going to use the new system.net encoding. And so this function provides the same functionality and a lot more that base64 coder does. And this does it across all platforms, but just for the sake of a simple example, we're using this base64 coder. And so then the implementation of encode varies. For Android, we use the tbase64 coder. Otherwise, we use our base64 encoder that I guess this is the TJ base64 coder, and this is the T base64 encoder. And this comes from the .NET encodings. Okay, that's all there is to it. Very simple, very straightforward. So let's go ahead and run this now, and you can see this running on Android, calling the Java jar file. Here it is running on my XE7 again. Go to my other tab. I tap the encode button, and you notice this time it actually does the base64 encoding, and that's because it has that jar file included in there. So this can be any Android jar file or any Java jar files. Most jar files, if they're not doing anything crazy, can work off Android as well. So very cool way to just really dive in there and take advantage of some of these Android features that were a little bit harder before. Now they're a breeze to do. Very, very easy to take advantage of. So we'll go ahead and hit decode, and we see it made a round trip. If I was running this on Windows or OS X or any other platform, then we use the system.net encodings to do the exact same functionality. So that is a look at our new Android features in XE7. Now this shows you actually only part of how we have better integration with the Android platform in XE7. And this is important. Android is on more devices than all other OSs combined. So you see that green bar there. In 2015, so there's forecasting, I guess, is going to be more Android platforms than OS X, iOS, Windows, and everything else put together. Right now, it's pretty close, neck and neck. It's definitely more Android than Windows or iOS. But when you have the other category, which I'm not sure will in the other category, but it's fairly good size, and you see Android's getting ready to take it over. So this really gives you the advantage of making the most of the Android platform, as well as all the other platforms you're able to support through the FireMonkey framework. Here are some resources for you. All these are links in the doc wiki. And actually, if you go to the What's New in XE7 page, you can scroll through and find these features that I talked about, and it'll link to these pages. I believe all these came straight from the doc wiki. What's new in XE7. So that's a good place to start if you're wanting to check out some of the new features that are available in XE7. And once the video is edited and put together, I'll put this all in a blog post on delphi.org, which you can go to and check out these, get these links as well. So next time, David I is going to be talking about the Internet of Things with Bluetooth. He's going to show you how XE7's new Bluetooth features let you get connected to all sorts of different things. This is a really, really cool. I'm actually really looking forward to this session. Bluetooth's really cool technology. There's Bluetooth LE, which you can have these Bluetooth LE devices that can run for like a year on the battery. It's crazy. So find out how to connect to these devices, interact with these devices, connect between devices, etc. with Bluetooth. So check it out, 18th of September, which is a Thursday, unless you're in Tokyo or Sydney, and then the time delay makes it the next day, which would be Friday morning. And with that, let's do some Q&A.
So Jim, Reed just asked a question about the splash screen and form load time. Does the splash screen stay on until the form appears, or if you've got a very large form, does it take longer?
Yes, it stays on until the form appears. And so I did a little testing with it, and it did stay on. I'm just trying to think if I did like a ridiculous amount of ridiculous long load time. But the way it's set up is it stays on until the form appears. So if your form maybe appears and has some other processing that takes place that it's not responsive right away, then you might need to do something else in the meantime, but it stays on until your form appears.
Okay, and Regis was saying, yeah, in XE6 to use the timer. Marco blogged about that, and others did, and just remove that code. You don't have to use that code once you have XE7. Caesar was asking, can you use PNG files for splash screens and get transparency in one of the other clamp mode or whatever?
That's a good question. So it uses PNG files, but I'm trying to think if it. I'm not sure. I don't think you'd use transparency because the what would you be becoming transparent to underneath? So that's not a. There's nothing that you'd be transparent to underneath that would make sense for that. So you probably wouldn't want to do that. I'm not sure what would happen if you did, but it would not. Probably not be a good thing.
Okay, and then Alf's asking, let's see. So if I have a jar file for Android by using Java OTOP, I could directly incorporate it with no more fuzz, question mark.
It's easy to incorporate, as I showed you. You can just point it to any jar file and create that. Now, obviously, if you have a really complex jar file, you're gonna have to write more code to use it, just because the calls are gonna have set up and take down or whatever. But whatever it is, you can use that utility, point it to that, creates the Java header wrappers, and then you can just do whatever you need to do to make that integrate in your application.
Hendra, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, is asking about C++ headers, and I'm just answering that R&D is still working on more converters. They're also working on Objective-C converter, so stay tuned for that. The first one that we're starting with is the Java to Object Pascal.
Yeah, they're kind of taking the, well, it seems like they're trying to optimize or leverage all this modular compiler architecture they have to make it all just work, which is kind of cool to see the results come out like this. Yeah, Regis, I'd already added the pass file in the project earlier so I could compile it to show that it was giving me an error message. So if you would have to add that to your project as well. So I was actually thinking about it. You could probably set this up like a build process or something like that, maybe, that would regenerate that if you were like modifying your Java source code file at the same time or something, so that it was all fresh when it was built. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but you probably could do something like that.
Go ahead. You also used the unit. You showed that in the source code.
Yeah, so. I used the unit. Yep. Yep. So Caesar's asking what would happen if you had PNG, had transparent background. I don't know what would happen. It'd probably be black. I think it's black behind it. What I would suggest, Caesar, is you test it and see. Because honestly, that's what I would have to do, is to test it and see, because that's not something I had considered how that would behave. So give it a shot and tell me what happens. So the Java 2 Object Pascal, Java 2 OP file is not in registered user downloads yet. Apparently they'd had some problems, and so I actually got the build that you saw I got from R&D last night and tested it with that. So it should be in registered user downloads in the very near future. If it's not, let me know, let David I know. We'll go talk to product management and R&D and get that up there. It should be in the very, very near future. My understanding is there was a couple bugs that came up towards the end, and that they ended up fixing those bugs, and so it should be up there shortly. So I'm a big fan, Regis, of the multi-platform project type in XE7, so you don't have to split your mobile and desktop into two different projects. I agree, that makes it a nice touch. And I didn't mention this in the video, but I went and did a tour around Australia and here in North America as well. And a lot of people I talked to after seeing XE7, or even emailing people that have started using XE7, they said they really feel like it shows the platform and all the tools are really coming together and maturing and getting that level of polish that you like to see with all, like the Java 2 OP is built in, is available, will be available shortly, and you have the multi-device designer, makes it so easy to take advantage of all these different platforms and really leverage them. So yeah, it's a great great release, lots of cool little things. And I want to skimmed on a few of the features that are in there. There's so many different features that are available to it. So Java 2 native bridge file generator for Android is available for the Delphi XE7 Pro or only RAD Studio. So the Java 2 OP, the utility I showed, will be available on, I believe, on the Delphi Pro and RAD Studio both, but it's not on the registry download page. So once it is available, it'll be available for all registered users. Obviously, going to have the mobility pack or better. So I see Tom's question here. So yeah, for Android, all you do is specify the image files. So, but you also have the option of specifying the tiling, etc. So yeah, it's very similar to the way iOS does. And the reason in an iOS the splash screens doesn't rotate, and that's actually the way iOS platform works, is that you the splash screen image is actually built into the iOS app specification, and you can specify a splash screen image, but it does not rotate portrait versus landscape in there. Now you can display your own splash screen after your form's displayed, and so some apps will actually display the static splash screen in the app and then transition to one they're displaying, and then that point they can start rotating and stuff. So there's some tricks they do with that, but there's not really a way to do that in iOS.
Neville was asking about you don't want to use if-defs in your code. What would you do instead?
Yeah, so my comment was that I had if-defs in my main project file, my main project code. So you generally want to isolate those in a reusable library. And so instead of having behind your form the code there, because that's the code you're editing all the time, right? So you move all those if-defs to another unit that is a unit that hopefully is edited less often. It comes down to some of the just general design principles like dry and solid and stuff like that, as far as how to encapsulate your code and behaviors properly.
And also in this example, really, the if-def was there because you could have used the built-in functions that we have now in the RTL for that example versus using the jar file, but you wanted to use a very simple jar file to show the conversion, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I looked at some other jar files, but it would have been just because there were more complex APIs that they were exposing to the jar file. It would have been, maybe a page of code to do something interesting. Whereas this one, you can see that it's just a simple little thing. So, not practical, but it definitely shows how the simple of the technology makes things work. So, for example, if you were to grab like Dropbox has a jar file, or maybe you have some third-party API that has a jar file that you could use to talk to their services, or maybe some special hardware or something like that. You can just simply run it through those same steps I showed you and get access to them. There's a question here from Clive. Can we still perform a similar wrapper approach for iOS routines that are not exposed? Do you have examples? And we did there's a skill sprint from last month, I guess, on iOS, exposing iOS APIs. So you can do the same thing there. It's just a different approach because it's iOS Objective-C instead of Java Bridge. So you can check that one out. And then I guess I heard that R&D is working on other import tools that could do the same sort of thing Java to OP does, except for maybe Objective-C or C++ or something like that. So stay tuned for
you can future releases. They're working on that. But I think you said earlier, Jim, you could even use the Java Pascal, put that Pascal interface in your C++ project, put the jar file, right?
Yeah, yep. For Java, if you're doing C++ or Object Pascal, the Java 2 OP tool is still the only tool you need, because the C++ compiler can compile the Java code, and it also automatically creates a header file for you. So you don't even have to look at that Object Pascal code. Just run it, then go through the header, and then boom, you got go through the compiler once, and you got the header, so you can look at the header and say, okay, now you're speaking my language. So, yep. So Wade asking if there's any plans to add an IDE tool for Java 2 OP similar to importing ActiveX COM and net objects. Maybe. Who knows?
Right now they're working on the conversion tools, and we've been using them ourselves, right? The R&D's been doing some of this, and then with hand tuning, so they're trying to get the conversion rate, that rate very very high, so you don't have to do that much hand thing. But stay tuned. There's more to come to help get all the interfaces, and if we don't wrap them again, you'll be able to convert them yourself.
I used an early version of this Java 2 OP tool that was a lot of work. You had to edit an XML file, and you had to run two different processes. You had to run one process and edit another XML file and run another process, and it was a lot of work. And then you usually had to edit things when you're done. So the Java 2 OP tools come a long way to be really easy to use. So yeah, we may see it integrated in IDE. We may see it more like we were talking about other tools to do other language imports as well. So lots of things coming.
Lyndon, he was asking about a mouse-style double-click, and there are the interactive gestures. You can look at those, long tap, double tap, and tap and hold. And I always say at this point, I say you'll need double tap anyway if you're stuck in Zombieland. Sorry, bad joke, bad movie joke.
Some things, the paradigms translate well onto mobile. Some things you really need to rethink the way they are on mobile, just because that's not really a common paradigm, the double tap on mobile, but there are ways to make it work.
Long tap or tap and hold. I mean, there's all those choices.
All right.
Okay, everyone. And Jim, thank you very much for the great spiel sprint. Thanks for joining us. And Jim, thanks again.
Sure, my pleasure. Talk to everybody later.